He came home early for silence, but what he found was laughter, warmth, and a love that threatened everything he'd built. The Langford mansion always looked perfect from the outside, 30,000 square feet of glass and stone, balanced perfectly on the edge of a private hill. But inside, perfection echoed. Richard Langford stood before the floor-to-ceiling window of his penthouse office, staring out at the city skyline. Deals, deadlines, and decisions, all precise, predictable. But family? That was chaos, and Richard had spent years avoiding it. Since his wife's passing 5 years ago, he'd learned to replace emotion with control. He checked his watch. His flight wasn't supposed to land until midnight, but an unexpected tailwind and a cancelled meeting meant he'd arrived early, too early. His driver glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Straight home, sir." Richard hesitated. "Yes. Home." The word felt foreign. Across town, in the mansion's vast kitchen, Amara Johnson was rinsing dishes, her hands trembling slightly from exhaustion. She had only been there 2 weeks, yet every room in this place made her feel like she didn't belong. Still, she worked quietly, humming under her breath, a tune her late mother used to sing. "Didn't expect you to be working this late," said a voice from the doorway. Amara turned, startled. Ethan Langford, barefoot, tousled hair, stood leaning against the doorframe with a half-smile. Unlike his father, Ethan's presence wasn't commanding, it was disarming. He carried an awkward kindness that didn't fit the mansion's marble perfection. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted softly. "And the kitchen needed cleaning." He chuckled. "You've cleaned this place twice already today. You're making the rest of us look bad." Amara laughed quietly, the sound surprising both of them. For a moment, the mansion felt alive. Then Ethan noticed her hands, rough, calloused, small scars across her knuckles. "You're not used to this kind of work, are you?" Her eyes darted away. "Work is work. We do what we must." Before he could ask more, thunder rolled outside, a Georgia summer storm approaching fast. The lights flickered. "Great," Ethan murmured. "Dad's gonna hate that. He likes everything under control." Amara smiled faintly. "Some things can't be controlled, Mr. Ethan." He grinned. "Ethan's fine." And that's when Richard Langford's car pulled silently into the driveway. He stepped into the foyer, the rain starting to fall behind him, and for the first time in years, he heard something from the kitchen, laughter. Soft. Honest. Alive. He followed the sound, his shoes clicking on marble, his pulse tightening with irritation, and something else. When he reached the doorway, his breath caught. There was his only son, sleeves rolled up, standing beside the new maid, the two of them laughing over a bowl of spilled flour, her dark curls dusted white, his smile brighter than Richard had seen in years. For a heartbeat, time froze. Then Richard's voice sliced through the warmth. "What on earth is going on here? Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin." For a few long seconds, no one spoke. The clock ticked on the far wall, mocking the silence. Amara's heart pounded so hard she could hear it. Her hands were still coated in flour, trembling slightly as she instinctively stepped back from the counter. Ethan straightened, eyes darting toward his father, his easy smile vanishing like a flame in the wind. "Dad. I didn't know you were back," Ethan said finally, voice hesitant. Richard Langford's gaze flicked between them, his son's floured hands, the disheveled kitchen, the maid's wide, frightened eyes. He took one slow step forward. "Clearly." His tone wasn't loud, but it was the kind of quiet that carried judgment sharper than any shout. "I can explain," Ethan started. "Please do," Richard said, removing his coat and draping it over a chair with mechanical precision. "Because from where I stand, this doesn't look like work." Amara swallowed hard. "Mr. Langford, But Richard's eyes pinned her in place. "You'll speak when spoken to." The words stung. Ethan's jaw clenched. "Don't talk to her like that." Richard turned to his son, incredulous. "Excuse me." "She was just helping me make something to eat. That's all." A dry, humorless chuckle escaped Richard. "Helping you? In the middle of the night? Covered in flour? In my kitchen?" He took another step closer, lowering his voice. "Do you have any idea how that looks?" Ethan's eyes flashed with quiet anger. "Maybe you care too much about how things look." Amara wanted to disappear. Every instinct told her to step back, apologize, beg to keep her job, but something in Ethan's tone rooted her in place. He wasn't being defensive for himself, he was protecting her. Richard's expression softened for the briefest moment, almost imperceptible, then hardened again. "You've embarrassed this family before with your little projects, Ethan. Don't let this be another one." "Projects?" Amara repeated, the word landing heavy. Ethan's face turned red. "She's not a project." But Richard was already turning away. "Amara, was it? You may collect your pay from Mrs. Gates in the morning. Your services are no longer required." The words hit like thunder. Ethan stepped forward. "You can't fire her." "I just did." Amara's throat tightened. "Please, sir," she whispered. "I didn't mean any disrespect. I only—" Richard cut her off, his voice rising for the first time. "You're here to clean, not to fraternize." The silence that followed was unbearable. The rain outside beat against the windows, filling the gaps where words couldn't. Finally, Ethan spoke, his voice low but steady. "Maybe if you came home more often, you'd understand why this house feels like a tomb." Richard froze. For a split second, something raw flickered behind his eyes. Pain, maybe guilt, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "Go to your room," he said quietly. Ethan didn't move. Instead, he turned to Amara. "I'm sorry." She shook her head, tears burning at the edge of her vision. "It's not your fault." When Richard finally walked away, his footsteps echoed through the hall, leaving behind the faint smell of rain and cologne, and a silence heavy with everything none of them dared say aloud. Outside, lightning flashed again. Inside, 3 hearts broke, for 3 very different reasons. If you were Amara, wrongly accused and humiliated for something innocent, would you walk away or fight for your place? Tell us in the comments. Morning came gray and cold, as if the storm had drained all color from the world. The Langford mansion was quiet again, too quiet. Only the faint hum of the refrigerator filled the kitchen where laughter had lived for a brief, shining moment the night before. The counters were spotless now, as if trying to erase the evidence of warmth. Amara stood by the sink, folding her cleaning cloth one last time. Her uniform was neatly pressed, her bag packed. Her heart, however, was a storm of its own. She had barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the shock on the billionaire's face, the contempt in his tone. The humiliation still burned. Yet beneath the pain, something else lingered. Ethan's voice, gentle but firm, "Don't talk to her like that." No one had ever spoken up for her before. The kitchen door opened softly. Ethan stepped in, his hair tousled, his eyes heavy with regret. "You're leaving," he said, though it wasn't a question. Amara nodded. "Your father made himself clear. He doesn't get to decide everything." A sad smile touched her lips. "When you live under his roof, I think he does." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, pacing. He's not a bad man, Amara. Just broken. He lost my mom, and somewhere after that, he lost himself too." She met his eyes. "And you? What about me? Did you lose yourself too, trying to make him proud?" The words hit him harder than he expected. He looked away, exhaling shakily. "Maybe. I don't even know what I want anymore. Every time I try to do something right, he turns it into a failure." Amara's voice softened. "Then maybe it's not you failing him. Maybe it's him failing to see you." For a long moment, neither spoke. The morning light poured through the window, catching on the last bit of flour dust that still lingered on the floor. A ghost of last night's laughter. Then footsteps echoed in the hall, measured, deliberate. Richard appeared in the doorway, dressed for work, a folder under his arm. His eyes flicked toward Amara's bag, then to his son. "So you're going through with it," he said evenly. "I am," Amara replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "Good. The agency will send someone more suitable this afternoon." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Suitable? You mean someone who won't make you uncomfortable?" Richard didn't rise to the bait. "Someone who knows their place." That was it. The quiet fury in Ethan's chest finally cracked. "Maybe you're the one who doesn't know your place, Dad. You've turned this house into a museum, everything perfect, everything lifeless. Mom would have hated it." Richard froze. That name, Mom, hung in the air like a ghost. His grip on the folder tightened until his knuckles whitened. "She's not here, Ethan," he said softly, voice trembling under the control. "And I won't let her memory be disrespected." Ethan's voice broke. "She'd be ashamed of what you've become." The silence after that was unbearable. Richard didn't respond, just turned and walked out. Amara felt tears sting her eyes. She whispered, "You shouldn't have said that." Ethan sighed. Maybe not. But someone had to. As the front door closed behind Richard, the sound echoed like a verdict. The mansion felt emptier than ever. By late afternoon, rain had returned, steady, cold, unrelenting. Amara stood by the servants' entrance, her small duffel bag at her feet. She'd been waiting nearly an hour for the rideshare she'd requested, but the app now showed canceled due to flooding. Her phone battery blinked red, 1% left. Perfect. She sighed, clutching her worn coat tighter around her shoulders. The wind whipped across the hilltop, carrying the faint smell of wet grass and pine. Everything in her life seemed to end like this, cold, waiting, powerless. Behind her, the kitchen door opened. "Still here." Ethan's voice cut through the rain. She turned. He was standing there in a gray hoodie, rain spotting his hair. He held out a towel. "You'll freeze." "I'm fine," she said softly. "The car canceled. I'll find another." "You won't," he said, glancing at the downpour. "Roads are flooding. No one's coming up here tonight." Amara hesitated. "I'll manage." "You can't walk down that hill in this weather," he said, stepping closer. "Dad wouldn't want you stranded." She gave a small, bitter laugh. "Your father would prefer I disappear quietly." Before Ethan could answer, headlights flashed across the driveway, his father's car. Richard Langford stepped out, jacket pulled over his head. He looked exhausted, the lines on his face deeper, his usual precision replaced by something raw. "Ethan," he said curtly, "why is she still here?" Ethan explained the flooding, the canceled car. Richard exhaled, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Fine. The storm should clear by morning. She can stay in the guest quarters for the night." Amara blinked, unsure she'd heard correctly. "Sir, I don't wish to cause any trouble." "It's already caused," he muttered. No sense adding pneumonia to the list. It was the closest thing to kindness he'd said all day. Ethan gave a small, grateful nod. "Thanks, Dad." Richard didn't reply, just turned toward the hallway, his shoes echoing on the marble. "Ethan, a word in my study when you're done." When he disappeared around the corner, Amara let out a shaky breath. He didn't have to do that. Ethan smiled faintly. That's his way of saying sorry. Does he ever just say it? "Not in this lifetime," Ethan said softly. Later that night, as thunder rolled outside, Amara found herself in the small guest quarters tucked behind the main kitchen, a cozy space that smelled faintly of lemon polish and old books. She wrapped herself in a blanket and listened to the storm hammering against the windows. Through the thin walls, she heard footsteps in the corridor, slow, deliberate. She held her breath. A knock. "Miss Johnson." Richard's voice, quiet, measured. Amara opened the door a crack. "Yes, sir." He stood there holding a mug. Steam curled into the air. "Mrs. Gates left earlier. I wasn't sure if you'd had dinner." Her eyes widened. "You brought me tea?" "Just something hot," he said stiffly, handing it over. "This house can be drafty." Their hands brushed for the briefest second. Warm skin against cold fingers. Both froze. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded once, eyes unreadable, and turned away. When the door closed, Amara exhaled, realizing her heart was racing, though she didn't understand why. Somewhere down the hall, Richard paused for a moment before walking back to his study, wondering when the sound of her voice had started to echo in his thoughts. Do you believe small gestures, like a cup of tea, can change the way two people see each other? Or is forgiveness too heavy for something so simple? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The storm lingered through the night. By morning, gray light slipped through the blinds of the guest quarters, painting everything in soft silver. Amara sat up slowly, clutching the blanket tighter. The mug of tea Richard had brought her sat empty on the bedside table, cold now, but she still remembered its warmth. She hadn't expected him to come back. He hadn't. Yet his simple act had unsettled something deep inside her, not affection exactly, but a flicker of confusion. How could a man capable of such cruelty also show moments of tenderness? The knock came again, lighter this time. Ethan. He was holding 2 mugs of coffee. "Morning," he said, his tone soft. "Dad's still locked in his study. Figured you could use this." She smiled gratefully, accepting the cup. "Thank you." Ethan leaned against the wall. "You sleep okay?" "Not really." "Me neither," he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "I keep replaying last night. You didn't deserve that." Amara's eyes dropped. "Your father's not wrong about everything. I shouldn't have been so comfortable. Maybe I forgot my place." Ethan frowned. "What place? You didn't do anything wrong. My dad he thinks respect means distance." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "And what does it mean to you?" He hesitated. "It means seeing people. Not pretending they don't exist." That answer hit her somewhere deep. She stared into her cup, voice trembling. "My mom used to say something like that. She was a maid too. Worked herself sick for families who never even learned her name. When she died, the people she worked for didn't even send flowers." Ethan's chest tightened. "I'm sorry, Amara." She smiled faintly, tears glimmering in her eyes. "I promised myself I'd never end up like her, invisible. But life doesn't care about promises. I took this job because my brother's tuition is overdue. And because I'm tired of fighting to be seen." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. "You're not invisible to me." The sincerity in his tone made her heart stutter. Before either could say more, the door opened slightly. Richard stood there. Ethan stiffened. Amara quickly wiped her tears. "I need a word with you both," Richard said quietly. His eyes flicked to Amara, not harsh this time, but cautious. "In the study." They followed him down the hall. Inside, sunlight poured through tall windows, glinting off family photos on the shelves, a younger Richard, smiling beside a woman with kind eyes. Amara's breath caught. "Your wife?" she asked gently. Richard paused, his back to them. Her name was Clara. He ran a thumb over the edge of one photo. "She was the heart of this house. When she died, I thought, if I kept everything in order, maybe the pain would stay contained. It didn't. His voice cracked on the last word. Ethan stepped closer. Dad. Richard didn't look at him. You remind me of her. That's the problem. You feel everything too deeply. And every time I see you, I see what I lost. The room went silent. Amara's eyes softened. For the first time, she saw not a tyrant, but a man grieving behind his armor. Richard turned to her. You have her kindness. The way you look at people, she used to do that. Amara blinked back tears. Then maybe she sent me here for a reason. The words hung in the air, unplanned but true. For a fleeting moment, Richard didn't look like a billionaire at all. He just looked human. Later that afternoon, the rain finally stopped. The mansion felt different, lighter somehow. The usual stiffness in the air had softened, replaced by something almost peaceful. In the kitchen, sunlight pooled across the countertops. The smell of freshly baked bread drifted through the air. Amara stood at the island, hands dusted with flour again, this time without fear. She was quiet but calm, humming softly to herself. Back at it again? Ethan's voice teased from behind her. She turned, smiling shyly. Old habits. He grinned. You know, I don't think this kitchen has seen this much life since my mom. Amara hesitated, sensing the tenderness beneath his joke. She used to cook? All the time, he said, stepping closer. She loved making cinnamon rolls. Dad would pretend not to like sweets, but he'd always steal one before breakfast. Amara laughed softly. Sounds like you get your charm from her. Ethan raised a brow. You think I'm charming? She blushed, pretending to focus on kneading the dough. I think you talk too much. They both laughed, the sound light and easy, a balm after the storm. At the far end of the hall, Richard paused, listening unseen. The laughter that once irritated him now tugged at something deep inside. He remembered that same sound years ago, his wife's laughter mingling with their son's. For a moment, he let himself smile. Then, quietly, he entered. I smell cinnamon, he said, his tone lighter than either expected. Ethan turned. We thought we'd bring some life back into the house. Richard glanced at Amara. Seems to be working. Amara wiped her hands nervously on her apron. Would you like to try one, sir? When they're done. Richard hesitated, then nodded. I would. It was such a simple exchange, yet the air shifted with it, something unspoken, an offering of peace. While the rolls baked, the three of them sat at the counter. Silence, once awkward, now felt safe. Ethan spoke first. You know, Dad, you could open the garden again. Mom loved that place. Richard's eyes softened. I had it locked after she passed. Couldn't bear to see it without her. Amara leaned forward gently. Maybe it's time you see it with her memory, not without her. Her words landed softly, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Later, as the timer dinged, Amara pulled the tray from the oven. The scent of cinnamon filled the kitchen, warm, sweet, and nostalgic. She placed 3 rolls on a plate and slid it toward Richard. He hesitated, then took a bite. The texture, the flavor, it was perfect. His eyes glistened. This tastes like her. Amara's lips trembled with a smile. Maybe she's reminding you she never really left. The words broke through the last wall he'd been holding up. For the first time in years, Richard Langford laughed, really laughed, and it sounded like forgiveness. Ethan looked at him, stunned, then joined in. Amara's heart swelled as she watched them, father and son, laughing in the same kitchen that once held only silence. She realized then, love wasn't always loud or grand. Sometimes it was in the smallest things, a cup of tea, a shared meal, a simple laugh. Have you ever felt healing begin in the simplest moment? A conversation, a meal, a smile? Tell us about that one moment that changed everything for you. Evening crept in slowly, gold fading to gray beyond the glass walls. The kitchen still smelled of cinnamon and warmth, but beneath it lingered tension, subtle, waiting to crack. The peace of the day had been almost too good to last. Amara stood at the sink, washing the last dish, when she heard it, Richard's voice, sharp and low, coming from his study. "I told you not to come here without calling first." She froze. The voice that answered was female, clipped and icy. "You've been avoiding the board meetings, Richard. Investors are concerned. And now this." Amara didn't want to listen, but their voices carried down the hall. "This what?" Richard asked. "This girl you've taken in," the woman hissed. "A maid? The staff's been talking. Photos are circulating, your son spending time with her. You know what this looks like." Amara's chest tightened. Richard's reply came slow and controlled. "It looks like none of your business." But the woman pressed on. "It is my business. The company can't afford scandal. You already have a reputation for instability since Clara died. If the press gets wind of this, your family name will burn." Silence. Then softly, "Get out, Linda." The door slammed a moment later. Amara stepped back just as Richard appeared in the hallway. His eyes met hers, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw something close to fear. "How much did you hear?" he asked quietly. She swallowed hard. "Enough." He sighed, running a hand over his face. "You shouldn't have." "Shouldn't have what?" "Heard the truth." Her voice trembled, anger rising beneath her restraint. "That I'm a problem you need to hide?" "That's not what I said." "But it's what you meant," she whispered. Richard stepped closer, frustration bleeding through his composure. "You don't understand the world I live in, Amara. Everything I've built depends on perception." Her eyes glistened. "And what about people? Don't they matter more than perception?" He hesitated. "They should." "Then why do I feel like a mistake you're ashamed of?" Before he could answer, Ethan entered, hearing only that last sentence. "What's going on?" Amara turned away, tears threatening. "Your father's right. I shouldn't have stayed." Ethan looked between them, fury rising. "What did he say to you?" "Nothing that isn't true," she said softly. "I don't belong here." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Don't you dare let him make you feel that way." "Ethan," Richard warned, "this isn't the time." "No," Ethan snapped, stepping between them. "You're doing it again, controlling everything. You think money buys respect, but all it's bought us is loneliness." "Enough." Richard's voice thundered through the room. The silence that followed was electric. Amara's tears finally fell. "Please stop." She turned, grabbed her small bag from the corner, and walked toward the door. "Amara," Ethan called, his voice breaking. "Don't go." But she didn't look back. As the door closed behind her, the wind howled outside, the storm returning, mirroring the one inside their hearts. Richard stood motionless, staring at the empty doorway. For the first time, he realized he wasn't protecting his family, he was destroying it. The rain had not stopped. It whispered against the mansion windows, soft and constant, like regret refusing to fade. Richard sat alone in his study. The fire had gone out hours ago, leaving only the glow of the city lights beyond the glass. He hadn't moved since Amara left. On the desk lay the photo of his late wife, Clara, her eyes smiling the way Amara's had when she first cooked in his kitchen. He whispered to the silence, "You'd tell me I did it again, wouldn't you?" The house answered only with the hum of the storm. In another part of the city, Amara sat in a tiny apartment she'd once shared with her cousin. She stared at her trembling hands, still dusted with flour from that afternoon. Everything she'd tried to build, belonging, peace, love, had collapsed in a single breath. But underneath the pain, she knew something else. She didn't regret any of it. Ethan hadn't gone to school that morning. He couldn't. Instead, he wandered the city streets, his hoodie pulled low, replaying every word, every silence. He had thought love would fix everything. But maybe love was supposed to break things first, to show what was worth keeping. He stopped under a bridge, watching the water rush below. For a long moment, he considered calling her, but what would he say? That he hated his father? That he felt lost? He pulled out his phone anyway. His thumb hovered over her name. He typed, "I miss you. Please don't give up on us." Then deleted it. At the same time, Richard finally stood. He poured himself a glass of water, though his hands shook slightly. He wasn't used to feeling powerless. But the quiet had a way of teaching truth. He'd built walls around himself so high that love could only knock, never enter. Now he realized, maybe it was his turn to open the door. He grabbed his coat, keys, and stepped into the storm. Amara heard the knock long before she moved to answer. 3 slow, deliberate taps. She opened the door, and froze. Richard stood there, soaked through, his expression unreadable. "I shouldn't be here," he said softly. "But I couldn't stay away." Amara's eyes filled instantly. "Why?" He took a breath. "Because I was wrong. I said I was protecting my family, but I was protecting my pride. And in doing that, I almost lost both." She shook her head slightly. "You don't owe me this." "Yes, I do." He stepped closer, voice trembling with the weight of it. "You reminded me what kindness looks like. What love feels like. And I can't go back to silence." For a long moment, the only sound was the rain between them. Then Amara whispered, "It's not too late, Richard. It never is, not if we still choose love." He exhaled shakily, a tear escaping despite his composure. "Then that's what I'm choosing." The next morning came quiet and clean, the air washed fresh by the night's rain. The mansion looked softer somehow, less like a fortress, more like a home learning how to breathe again. Ethan sat at the breakfast table, eyes puffy from lack of sleep. The world felt heavy, unfinished. He stared at the empty seat where Amara used to sit, until he heard the sound of the front door opening. Footsteps. He looked up, and froze. Amara stood there, hesitant but real, her bag still slung over her shoulder. Behind her, Richard hovered like a man who had finally learned how to wait. "Hey," she said gently. Ethan blinked hard, his voice breaking. "You came back." She smiled through tears. He wouldn't take no for an answer. Richard cleared his throat, awkward and humble in a way Ethan had never seen. "I thought, maybe we could try breakfast together. Like a family." The word family hung in the air, fragile, hopeful, new. Amara stepped inside. The morning light caught her face, and for the first time in weeks, she didn't look like the maid. She looked like someone who belonged. Ethan pulled out her chair, the same way she used to for him when she first started. The gesture made her laugh softly. "You've learned some manners after all," she teased. He grinned faintly. "Maybe you were a better teacher than I realized." Richard moved toward the counter, his sleeves rolled up. "I'll make coffee. Or try to." Amara and Ethan exchanged amused glances. "You," Ethan said. "Making coffee?" Richard chuckled, a little embarrassed. "Let's just say I've been rethinking what matters." As he fumbled with the filter, Amara stepped beside him. "You're supposed to grind the beans first," she said softly. Their hands brushed, the contact brief, electric, human. For a moment, everything stilled. No power. No walls. No fear. Just 3 souls learning to exist in the same quiet, honest space. When the coffee was ready, they sat together. Richard looked between them, his son and the woman who'd reminded him what love costs and why it's worth paying. He raised his cup slightly. To second chances. Amara's smile trembled, but she lifted her cup too. To home. Ethan nodded. To love, the real kind. They clinked cups, and the sound was small but perfect. Outside, the sun broke through the last of the clouds, spilling light into the kitchen. The same kitchen where everything had begun, where laughter had once returned after years of silence. Only now, it wasn't just a place of work. It was a place of healing. Do you believe people can truly change when love enters their life, or do they only reveal who they were all along? Tell us your thoughts below. Thank you for watching to the end. I believe you enjoyed it. We have a lot of other interesting stories like this lined up for you already, so click the image showing on your screen to watch the next.